as SAG Foundation as a nonprofit, which means we get grants and donations, and the grants people. So as soon as the promo video is over, I'll do it here. Is it on the screen?
The work the SAG Foundation is doing is enormously important. From the up-and-coming actors to the veterans like myself, the foundation is here to help all of us.
As fellow artists, we've all been there. It's crucial that we remember where we came from and help out however we can.
For over 25 years, the SAG Foundation has been the industry's best-kept secret, and we're out to change that.
As natural storytellers, it's great that we have the opportunity to give back through the Children's Literacy Program.
A disaster like Sandy really brings it home with how crucial the SAG Foundation is. Their donation drive helped so many people in need.
The seminars and workshops are crucial. Working together is what makes us better.
The SAG Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies solely on donations to keep these important programs free for everyone.
The SAG Foundation can't do it alone. We need you.
If you need help, ask.
If you can help, give.
We're all in this together.
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 Together, everyone benefits.
Join the cause.
Back now.
Hello. So good evening, everybody. Hi. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to all of you in the room. It looks like a full house, and to all of you guys watching on live stream. My name is Stacy Travis, and I am co-chair of Government Affairs and Public Policy in SAG-AFTRA Los Angeles. That's a mouthful, isn't it? We call it GAP-LA. That's easier. On behalf of our committee and our great partners, the SAG Foundation and FilmLA, we would like to welcome you to what I hope will be a lively discussion on filming in Los Angeles. SAG-AFTRA has offices across the country. We're clearly a national union. We have worked hard for our members to try to keep production inside the United States. But tonight's discussion is going to focus on the 70,000 members that are here in Los Angeles, our largest local. I've been working as an actor for years, and I have seen firsthand for myself and my other actor friends and my crew friends the economic effect that fleeing production has had on our industry. We took a long time to get incentives going, and that has cost everyone who makes a living in this business, and certainly all the support businesses. The very first movie was made in Los Angeles 107 years ago. The motion picture industry in the ensuing decades has been an essential source of economic activity, tax revenue, jobs, and tourism for California. It generates hundreds and thousands of jobs each year and brings revenue in the billions. And in order to retain and grow California's signature entertainment industry, our state must be competitive. Since the California Film and Tax Credit Program launched in July of 2009, $500 million in tax credits have been allocated to over 200 film and TV programs. Collectively, those projects are contributing $3.9 billion in direct production spending. Of that, $1.3 billion is for wages paid to over 27,000 below-the-line crew and 14,000 cast members. Now, the reality of those numbers is that we cannot afford to have this industry leave our state. Additionally, we have the industry's most skilled labor pool here in California from before, in front, and behind the camera. And where producers go outside of state lines to other locales, they are not only losing out on a large concentration of experienced and talented actors, dancers, and singers, but specialized craftsmen such as costumers, seamstresses, drivers, gaffers, electricians, camera crews, set design, stunts, just to name a few, whose talent and experience cannot be replicated by inexperienced workers that are new to the trade. SAG-AFTRA and other unions, guilds, and industry partners have been working to stem the tide of production leaving our state. We realize that Hollywood, our heritage industry of 107 years, will not survive unless Sacramento helps us level the playing field by offering incentives for California, and that producers find creative ways to work within those budgets. The current incentives have proven immensely popular. People want to stay in the state if they can. As one producer said to us, "I like sleeping in my own bed at night." Well, tonight we have assembled experts who can speak to all sides of the issue, from proposed legislation to reality, to the need for the incentives in the way we would like them to be and the way they are now. Thank you again for joining us tonight. I would now like to introduce our moderator, Ilyanne Morden Kichaven, who is the Executive Director of SAG-AFTRA Los Angeles Local. Welcome, Ilyanne.
Probably went around this the wrong way. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Today's wrap said why Hollywood's biggest films are leaving LA for London. How timely is our panel, and how wonderful we have to have these distinguished guests here to talk about why pictures are leaving, but also the success of many, many films that are shooting here in Los Angeles. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First up, we have Chris Baugh, a fourth-generation California. Chris has been a Los Angeles-based location manager for the past 2 decades. After joining Local 399, Chris went to work in both feature films and televisions with various directors, and his recent credits include Argo's, Angel and Demons, We Bought a Zoo, Secretariat, The Holiday, and Arrested Development. Chris also received the 2012 Cola Studio Feature Film Location Professional of the Year Award for his work on Argo. Please welcome Chris. Next to Chris, we have Amy Lemisch. Amy is the Executive Director of the California Film Commission. She oversees all the state's efforts to facilitate motion pictures, television, and commercial productions. She was appointed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger in May 2004 and continues to serve under Governor Brown. Under her leadership, the Commission coordinates with all levels of state and local government to promote California as a production locale. Such efforts, in turn, create jobs, increase production spending, and generate tax revenue. Welcome, Amy. Next to Amy, we have Paul Audley. The Board of Directors of FilmLA, after a national search, selected Paul to become the 3rd president of the organization in 2008. Since arriving to FilmLA, Paul has negotiated new long-term contracts from client municipalities and school districts, initiated a public educational campaign entitled FilmWorks, and has overseen improvements in the organization's online permit system, OPS. In 2012, a new long-term strategic plan was developed under his direction and adopted by the board in June. Paul has been recognized for raising the public image and reputation of FilmLA, and we'd also like to greatly thank FilmLA for co-hosting tonight's event. So welcome, Paul. At the end, to my far left, is Richard Prince. Richard is a graduate of UCLA with a BA in film and television. Go Bruins. I'm a Bruin, too. Sorry. Richard is also a graduate of the Directors Guild training program. He has been the production manager for the very, very successful CSI series. His credits include as well The Invasion, License to Wed, Saw, Under Siege, Man from U.N.C.L.E., Risky Business, My Bodyguard, How the West Was Won. We could go on and on. Welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for being here. Stephen Wolfe is next to Richard, and he's a seasoned film producer and president of Sneak Preview Entertainment, the production and talent management company currently celebrating its 20th year. How great is that to have an independent producer, 20 years? He has produced a diverse range of films throughout his career, including Fox Searchlight's sleeper hit, 500 Days of Summer, also Our Family Wedding, Miss March, Fat Girls, A Dennis the Menace Christmas, Twin Falls, Idaho, and Relax, It's Just Sex. He's currently producing a screen adaptation of David Talbert's best-selling novel Baggage Claim, and he recently completed The Secret Lives of Dorks, as well as Beautiful Loser with Jennifer Tilly. Welcome, Stephen. Coming from the legislative point of view, we're very happy to have Councilman member-elect Felipe Fuentes, who was elected to the state legislature in 2007 to represent the 39th Assembly District in Los Angeles. During his time as a state assemblyman, Felipe has authored legislation spurring economic development and job creation, improving the quality of our education system, and increasing the accessibility to affordable health care and housing. Two of his signature bills provided a $300 million extension to the state Landmarks Film and Television Tax Credit Program. Congratulations on his appointment to the City Council. He will be, or his winning of the election. He will begin his term on July 1st. Please help me welcome Councilman Fuentes. And of course, anyone who's worked or has watched film and television has to know the gentleman to my left, Stephen Collins, formidable, very, very talented actor. He's probably best known for his role as Reverend Eric Camden on the record-setting family drama Seventh Heaven. But among his film credits are Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He was the captain of the Enterprise very briefly. He was, of course, opposite Diane Keaton in First Wives Club. And Because I Said So. He was also in All the President's Men and, of course, most recently in The Three Stooges. TV highlights include The Two Mrs. Grenvilles, Named Jackie, The Betty Broderick Story, Fallen Skies, and Stephen is also going to be seen in the upcoming Lifetime series Devious Maids, which premieres June 23rd. Welcome, Stephen. So we're going to start the conversation. As you can see, we're going to discuss every angle of the California incentives. Why don't we start with Amy, who's going to give us a little brief overview and tell us what are these incentives and how are they working?
Okay, so is it on? It's working? Yeah. I run the California Film Commission, and one of the programs that we administer is the Film and Television Tax Credit Program. It began in 2009 with legislation that allowed for $100 million a year to be allocated to certain film and television projects. I think Ilyanne wanted me to talk a little bit about what is eligible to apply, because it's not everything that goes on in California is eligible to apply. We're limited to feature films from $1 million to $75 million budget range, TV series that are new, not already on the air, that are produced for basic cable, 1 hour scripted dramas, and then any TV series that wishes to relocate or move from another location back to California, those are eligible as well as MOWs. So we just started the 5th year of our program. You might have read that on June 3rd, we accepted applications for our 5th year of the program to allocate our next $100 million in tax credits, and it's become so popular, and there is such high demand for these credits. So on Monday, we received 380 applications, and we are going to be giving allocations to 31. So the odds are pretty bad. The demand is very high, and I'll let you decide if the funding is adequate for this program. The whole goal is to keep as many projects as possible in California. I'm here to create jobs, keep small businesses thriving. So this is the main tool that I have in my arsenal to do that. I think I'll leave it at that. I'm sure we're going to get into it a lot more.
Okay, so Councilman-elect Fuentes, this obviously is kind of a no-brainer for all of us in here in the room. What is it about you obviously helped us a great deal achieve this, and you championed it, but why is California kind of behind the curve in comparison to other states?
Well, you know, the competition is fierce, and I think many of us believe that there ought to be a premium to be in California, but it has to be something that actually makes sense for us. And this program makes tremendous sense. Depending on which study you look at, there's an average about 3 to 8% return on investment by the state of California. So for every dollar that we put in, the $100 million, you get back almost $3 or even $8, depending on sort of the instance. And so what happens is that in the legislative process, it's very difficult to get people to understand that this investment actually pays for itself. It's a tax credit. It's usually seen as a giveaway, and we all know that that's not the case. This actually generates jobs, generates revenues, and keeps what I think is a signature industry for California in California. But probably part of our challenge in Sacramento, because that's where the legislation gets done, is that this is seen as a Los Angeles benefit. And there's this north-south thing that happens between Northern California and Southern California, despite the fact that all of California does well. And I think a recent example is, you mentioned The Wrap, and they're a very good blog, and I follow it. But even in their reporting, they called it a Los Angeles tax credit. It's a California tax credit.
So does it help for people to contact people if you don't live in the north part of the state? Does it help for people who live in Los Angeles to try to explain, or do you just need to talk with the people who represent you here in Southern California?
Listen, it helps in every instance to talk to your representatives. I mean, all of us are good voters, and we go out and vote on election day, and we know who our assembly members are and who our senators are, and it's really important for us to contact and communicate with them. But even more than that is the legislative process, hearing from SAG-AFTRA, which we did in this. We heard from the Teamsters. We heard from Paul and from Amy. We had a tremendous full court press every year that I authored this legislation, which is to say that we can't stop. We have to make the case, because we were able to get $100 million on the first year that I ran the bill, and then we got up to $200 million in 2 years the second year that I did it. We shouldn't be doing this on a year-to-year basis. We should give the industry predictability, certainty that there's going to be enough in California for the work to continue.
So, Stephen, you were one of the producers who were lucky enough to get a picture produced under the incentive. Can you talk about the process and the application, and what was going to happen? Can you talk about how you produced your film? What the anticipation was?
Is that one question?
Yeah, talk about anything. Sure.
You know, this film was actually a long process. It's a movie that, you know, we have a studio that's distributing our film, but it's made as an independent film, and with very tight budgets that typically you have on independent films. So the challenge on Baggage Claim is that it was a movie that has a large cast. It takes place in Los Angeles, Houston, New York, Chicago, Baltimore, and I think Miami. And so I actually applied for the tax credit the very first year on this movie. It's been a long process. And I got on the waiting list, and you know, had to keep excitement going at the studio and praying we were going to get that incentive, because I didn't feel like we could make the film in a reasonable amount of money unless we had that incentive, because we were going to use so much money to travel elsewhere. And so we created a plan where we would go for a really short time to different places with just some key actors, like in 1 week, and get just enough shots to make it believable that it was in all these other cities. But we would film the majority of it here in Los Angeles, utilizing the tax incentive to bring our number down to a number that the studio would green light for us. And what ended up happening was we actually got the incentive in the first year after we moved up the waiting list. And I don't remember, Amy, how many were in the first year? Do you remember?
First year was a lot smaller.
Yeah,
I think
way
it was
smaller.
only about 70.
Yeah, so, you know, we got it, and we started planning this film, and literally maybe 8 weeks before it was time to start shooting the movie, the studio changed their mind. They felt it was still too expensive, and they put it into turnaround. And so we were kind of dead, and then it was literally, I think, 2 years later, in the beginning of 2010, that they got interested in it again. But can you whack many millions of dollars out of the budget? Because we really had to bring it down. And so, you know, I said, we got to get this incentive, and because it was really key for us to being able to get the movie made. And we applied again, and we were really lucky. In 2012, we actually were in the first cut, in the top 28. So I was very lucky because we got an incentive twice, And the second time around, we actually got to make the movie with the incentive. So I'm going to take a quick minute to show you a trailer for the movie so you can see a little bit about, you know, what this movie that takes place all over the country looks like, that was shot entirely in Los Angeles within the studio zone. Hopefully bigger than that.
My relationships have never been cleared for takeoff, but at least I'm not the only one in my family not to be married.
We have some news. I'm engaged.
I can't go to my little sister's wedding single.
If you need a man, honey, I can get you one of those.
It's not a man I need, it's a husband or a potential husband in a month.
Why don't you marry Gail? If she goes a week without waxing her mustache, they'll think it's Steve Harvey. Look, it's not like she's got enough time to meet somebody new, so why not revisit somebody else? For the next few weeks, any of your exes that flies anywhere, anytime, we're gonna know.
That's right. There's Tanya in ticketing.
Calvin at curbside check-in.
And there's Cedric in security.
Take everything out your pockets. I need your pockets out your pockets.
You got 30 days and 30,000 miles.
I want you to have these cranberry flavored for the holidays.
One of your exes is on a flight from Los Angeles to Houston.
Montana.
Langston.
Montana.
Curtis.
This is juicy. Sorry, she's jealous.
You need to be at JFK in an hour.
I am not going over to that man's house. Do you know how crazy that would make me look?
Hello?
I'm in the trash can.
Are you nuts?
Montana Moore.
Damon Diesel. Wow, you're doing well for yourself.
Damon?
Who is that?
Damon!
This ain't my house. It's hers. I can't afford this.
Damn door!
She crazy.
Open, 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 open!
Oh, she crazy. Crazy, she crazy. You spent your whole life being your own woman. Why you want to change now?
I just would really like to be somebody else's too.
Now is not the time to get down on yourself, Montana. In a week, maybe.
When you find love, and you will, don't ever let it go.
Honey, what are you doing?
He just wanted international travel booty.
That man could have had intergalactic travel booty.
Nobody move. I have no life, which gives me all day to ruin yours.
So that movie was all shot in Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I've been working in the industry for, I think, 32 years now. I love making movies in Los Angeles. I think it's the best place to make movies. I've made a lot of movies here in Los Angeles that a lot of people said you couldn't make in LA because you'd never get it done for the money. And I made them without tax incentives. I think we have another still from another film I did in 2008 called 500 Days of Summer, which was really an enjoyable experience because we had a chance to show Los Angeles in a very different light than most people are used to seeing it in the movies. You can bring that still up if you want. This is a park bench that we shot in downtown that was a sort of vantage point for a lot of the movie, where one of the two main characters actually met several times throughout the movie. And this film was all shot within literally, 10 square blocks of downtown Los Angeles, and other than maybe 3 days in the whole shooting schedule. So you can shoot movies here. It's easier with the tax incentive. It's not hard. It's a lot of paperwork, applications that have to be filled out, and you have a lot of reporting to do along the way. But it's nothing that's prohibitive and impossible to do, and it makes it much easier to add a lot more to the production value of the film. And we have the best crews in the world here. We have the best support services in the world here, and it's a great place to make movies. So I'm trying to make as many as possible. I unfortunately did not get a tax credit this year, but I'm praying I'm going to move up the waiting list, and a lot of the projects do. I've had a couple of them over the years that have moved up the waiting list, and unfortunately, I couldn't get it together quickly enough to even utilize the funds. So, but they do roll over to other people when somebody pulls out. So
we'll just do a little shameless plug here. You're also doing all of these under SAG-AFTRA agreements, and you're finding them very easy, right?
Yes, but I mean, how else can you make a movie if you're not working with SAG-AFTRA?
So Paul, we talked about filming in Los Angeles. So you make it easy, your office. Can you talk a little bit about what your office does and how you help producers like Stephen?
Sure. We're the largest film office in the world, really, as far as staff and activity level. So we've developed an online system. We're multi-jurisdictional. A single permit can cross city lines and into school districts. It's a single permit fee for up to 10 different locations. And we also have developed a locations library of all the government facilities you can film in. We worked with the City of Los Angeles to make almost all city facilities free and to make parking lots available for free use as an effort to try to combat some of that loss that we've seen. Even with the California tax credit program, we're still almost 60% behind the peak year in 1996 in feature films and over 30% behind where we were in television. The result of a great program, and we give great credit to then Assemblymember Fuentes for pushing this through, is that in the 4 years it's been there, the $500 million sounds like a lot of money, but when just the state of New York has $420 million a year in a broader incentive, you can see why California continues to lose ground. And we lose ground internationally as well, as everybody in the world loves this industry and the money that it produces. I just came back from Cannes, where one of the producers, an Indian filmmaker, said, everybody in the world knows the value of film, and they're all taking it from Hollywood, and Hollywood's doing nothing to stop it. And while that's not quite true, the truth is we're still not on a real competitive footing with the rest of the world.
So just so we know, so all those door hangers that you get when people say, that there's going to be production, that comes from FilmLA. So you want to welcome them into your neighborhood and talk to your neighbors about welcoming them into your neighborhood, because that's how we get more jobs.
I'm going to say that's really true. Having an easy time with neighborhoods and people who live here and businesses makes all the difference in the world as to whether we can stay here or want to stay here. So it's an inconvenience. I mean, when somebody shoots in front of my building, it's an inconvenience, but it's super important to be okay about that inconvenience for the bigger picture of how much revenue that filming brings and how many jobs it brings, and quite honestly, how many actors get more jobs because more things stay here.
So, Stephen, he mentioned actors getting more jobs staying here. I know you've traveled all over working, and you obviously had a series based here in Los Angeles, and now you've just shot a series somewhere else. Can you talk a little bit about what are actors' perspective? What do you think has changed?
Oh boy! First thing, I wasn't going to say this, but I want to add on to what was just said. I think there is a kind of user fatigue in Los Angeles. We take the film business for granted. You go to some parts of the world and people, I was just shooting in Atlanta, and everyone is so excited when they're shooting in their neighborhood, and they all come out and watch. In LA, it's like, what time are taillights tonight? When are you out of here? I want to know you're hard out. And then somebody, the gardener, as soon as they see the trucks roll up, it's like they call all the gardeners in the area, and they all turn on their leaf blowers, because they know that the location manager is going to come around with a handful of 50s and pay them off to not do what they would otherwise not be doing.
Don't give them ideas.
They're way ahead of me, unfortunately. But there is a kind of, I think there's a sort of been there, done that quality, and it's true. It's very important. It's important to the life of the city, and location managers are mostly stupendously good and responsible about this. We had one on Seventh Heaven who he could have been elected mayor, I think. I mean, he went around from door to door guaranteeing people that their neighborhood would be left exactly as it was. Doing repairs when necessary. There are a few location managers who hit and run. And those people are actually damaging the industry here tremendously. But so a good location manager is a very important cog in this wheel, and responsible location managers, because they're the ones who clean up after the people leave, and they're the ones who really end up being ambassadors to the neighborhood. You know, as an actor, I think if you're young, you love to go on location. If you're young and you're unattached, it's really exciting to go on location. As soon as you have a family, it's really a hardship to go on location. And I also couldn't understand the economics of this sort of eluded me. I was just working on a series in Atlanta, and I didn't want to go to Atlanta. I would much and the series they'd wanted to shoot the series here, but they couldn't afford it because the state of Georgia has created incentives that are so good that it broke down like this. The producer said, I said, look, you're flying in most of the actors. You're putting the permanent cast up in apartments. You're paying for rental cars. You're throwing in all these perks. You're flying in all the department heads. Some of them have to stay for long periods of time. The producers fly back and forth. The writers fly. How much money are you saving? And they said, $800,000 per episode. That's after spending all that money I just mentioned.
Wow.
So it really, this is what the state of Georgia has figured out, and this is why, if you look at a graph, production in Georgia is going like this, and what, LA was down 27% last year? So the work that these people are doing is tremendously important to the lifeblood of this city. I have a friend who's a neighbor, and she makes her living creating jewelry which she sells or rents to TV shows for the actors to wear on the show. She's making about a third what she used to make 5-6 years ago because there are so many fewer shows shooting in LA. Now she's just one person, but if her income, if she makes $25,000 a year instead of $75,000 a year, that's reflected in the local taxes she pays, the state taxes she pays, and the federal taxes she pays. You're not going to see her story show up in any of these statistics, but that story times thousands and thousands is the story of LA right now.
Wow. So, Chris, it seems like a lot of the Academy Award winners are done here in Los Angeles. You had the good fortune or the talent to work on Argo. When did you come on board? Was it always planned for Los Angeles?
Yes, Argo actually, a good portion of the film was set in Los Angeles, so I think and also Ben had a new family and he wanted to stay home. That's another anchor that could keep a film in Los Angeles. So, we knew it was going to be shot here. It was 9 out of 12 weeks was shot in Los Angeles. And so we doubled Iran and DC quite a bit, and it worked well. Los Angeles is a great city for filming in. There's so many different cultures that brings different types of architecture, and there's types of geography that you can really, you have a palette, a wonderful palette in Los Angeles to make a very high quality film. But unfortunately, just with I think the profits of film have dropped. There's pirating and eyeballs are kind of being diverted onto Facebook or YouTube, and so there's a lot of pressure. They're not earning the kind of money that they used to earn, and there's tremendous pressure that if they want to keep making movies, they've got to reduce the cost, and there's no way they can change that. So that's how these incentives were born, and it's put all this pressure on them to find a way. So Los Angeles actually you can make the best film here, but at a certain point, it's come to that point that they don't care that it's the highest quality. They just need to get it just enough that it can make some money on it. So, you have excellent crews here as well. The people that are in Los Angeles that are working in film have a passion for it. It's very important for them to do it right. They respect the history of it. It's been here for over 100 years. They use that knowledge. They're very skilled craftsmen, and they take it very seriously. I just flew in from Albuquerque. I'm on a film that was set in Los Angeles and got bumped to Albuquerque, and I've been there for 3 months. My personal life took a hit, and it's permanent, so that stinks. And I'm in a hotel room, and it's hard. And the crews that are there, they're sort of, they're smart and they're good people, but they sort of see this Hollywood coming into town as an opportunity, and it's kind of an opportunist mentality amongst the crew. They will, they jump ship. I have somebody jump ship out of my department once a week, and people are just always looking for the next job, and their performance, doesn't really matter because there's 5 more movies coming into town that are trying to crew up, and they have to hire people from that incentive pool. So it's a shame, and I think, if we look back at this period in filmmaking, that you're going to notice it's going to be pretty obvious that there's a certain change in the quality of film, and if a film's not, if a script doesn't fit in a rebate state, they'll probably throw it out. So that's, for me, that's a bigger picture. It's a shame. We've got this history of filmmaking in Hollywood, and we all took a lot of pride in it, and people wanted to make the best film they could, and I don't really hear that anymore. So anyway, I think that, Los Angeles, you've got the best quality, you've got great systems in place to make a fantastic film, but what I'm hearing is it's about the bottom line and the numbers, and we have to convince the legislators to take this seriously. The other states have done well at it. They've been successful. So the arguments against it have already been proved wrong, in my opinion. There's one thing I should say about what we could do in Los Angeles. I actually have found that neighbors, residents, and businesses have recently come around to appreciating who we are and what we do and why it's important. I've been getting a surprising amount of cooperation, even in Hancock Park and areas that are traditionally really tough to film in. But what I've noticed, in leadership roles, a lot of the government is behind us. But when you're dealing with city personnel, they've been kind of crunched in the last 4 or 5 years during the recession. And a lot of city personnel have they've reduced, they've taken on more jobs, and they don't really have the time or focus to appreciate what we're doing, and so I've found a lot of challenges in that aspect. I think it's really important to get the word out how the economy of cinema helps us all, and that needs to permeate not only citizens but government workers, and that's kind of the big challenge, I would say, right now. People that are overworked and underpaid, how do you get them to answer the phone and help out a film when it's just one more thing for their day? So,
you brought a couple of slides from Argo. I wonder if you could just
sure.
tell us how you decided upon these locations and how they were used.
Sure.
And what they
Okay, so that's a
represent.
house in Hancock Park. And that was the Canadian ambassador's house in Tehran. Now, again, there's so many waves of immigration into Los Angeles over so many periods of time. We were looking, we wanted, in looking for a house that's going to match Tehran in the 1970s, you need to kind of look at maybe where a wave of immigration, there was a wave of immigration from Tehran in the late 70s. These people brought their architectural styles. So we would kind of try to target that group of people. In addition, then, we would look at the building materials and try to avoid, traditionally a California house is going to have a lot of local redwood or timber or something like that. So we're looking at like building materials. This had a lot of stone and marble, and the other issue was that it's a period piece. So we actually zeroed in on a house that we liked that had been remodeled, and we found the architect that designed it, and then we went and studied that person's work, and we found the homes that they built, and after about the 4th one, we found this one that wasn't remodeled, and it worked perfect.
Great. I think that there was also a second slide, if you want to just talk about that. That's the airport, right?
Right, that's actually Ontario Airport. It's a closed airport. Worked perfect. We didn't really do much to it. It had the right bones. There weren't, again, a lot of...
We shot there too.
Oh, you shot there too. That's a great facility. You know what, we covered the stained glass because it's very recognizable. There's like a 40-foot stained glass window.
Probably in the older building?
The older building in Ontario Airport. And they use it all the time. It was in, Catch Me If You Can. But that worked out. That was, a city-owned property. It was very reasonably priced and worked perfect.
Boy, great. Richard, I know you've been on the CSI series for a number of years, and obviously they use Los Angeles for all different kinds of locations. Can you talk about?
Right. Well, I've been lucky enough to be on it for the last 7 years. Unfortunately, we got canceled 2 weeks ago. But during that time, certainly we've shot all over Los Angeles. We've shot the Ontario Airport as well. Most of our location work has been in downtown LA, which certainly is a challenge, both economically and just logistically, and trying to find the right artistic look to give it New York. There are a number of streets, and it has been very easy for us to shoot down there. They say, although economically challenged, so we did reduce the number of days we shot down there over the years. One of the other things is every year we would at least go back to New York for 1 week of filming. So over the past 7 years, I've certainly seen the business grow back there from what was, I think, about 5 series that were being done there when I first started back in 2006, and then to the point now where I think there's something like 28 different series that are being done back there, mainly because of the economic incentives and convincing everybody to go back there for that. And certainly the networks are looking at that. We were not eligible for the incentive here because it was a network series that started here. But I know in the last round of pilots and shows that certainly CBS picked up, most of their 1-hour dramas are going to be done outside of Los Angeles, Charleston, New Orleans, Atlanta, Austin. So I mean, certainly when I started CSI New York, it was mostly features that were going to the incentive states. And I've worked in almost all of those states over the years, and watched the crews grow from where you might be able to have 1, maybe 2 shows done in that city to now, I mean, in Atlanta, I think I heard there were 12 different series and features that were being done there. And essentially over the years, those crews have been trained to do it and do it well enough that the networks and the studios keep going back there to get that advantage, that $800,000 an episode advantage, and it all works out on paper. The thing that the studios never take into account are the emotional ties and the speed of the crews that you have here in Los Angeles. I know that at the breakfast this year, Amy had a feature, I think it was called The Cell. The Call. The Call. There was a Halle Berry feature where the producer talked about how it originally was scheduled to go up to, I think, Montreal, but then they got the incentive and they came back here, but the only way to do it was to take it from a 40-day schedule to a 23-day schedule, and they were able to do it because the crews here could meet that challenge and do it, which you don't always have in some of these other states where they simply don't have the experience or the knowledge to be able to do it. They're trying to learn, they're trying to get it, their states are trying to encourage that, but you really can, as you say, do it here if you plan it intelligently, and you may have to shoot it in less days than you would someplace else, but you still get it done and it looks good. But now with most of the television series, as I say, the networks are all looking at the bottom line and looking how it's going to save them money to get the same look going somewhere else, to create that in New Orleans or Shreveport or Atlanta. And I mean, all those crews are trying, and obviously the networks have their bottom line they're trying to do because there's less viewers watching now and the advertising rates go down. So it does become bottom line. But you just have to be creative and inventive and be able to try to work with the crews here if you want to keep it here. And all of us are looking at that, and unfortunately I have friends who have decided to move out of Los Angeles, to go to some of these cities in order to maintain jobs, in some cases leaving their families to go there, in some cases taking their families. But it's a challenge now to get the programs done for the money that the studios and networks want to do it, and obviously the incentives provide the easiest way for them to do it.
Amy, when you're looking at projects, what are you looking at? Are you looking at content? Are you looking at what's
Never.
Okay, so talk.
We don't censor. We don't look at the projects. We do a lottery. Because the demand is so high, there would be no criteria that anyone could come up with to pick and choose projects because everybody has a need. Are you going to pick an indie over a studio, or a studio over an indie, or a TV over a feature? How do you do that? Who needs it most? So we, from the very beginning of the program, we knew that there would be this issue, and we do a blind lottery. And only after we've numbered, established a queue through the lottery, do we actually open the envelopes and see what's what. But we do not disqualify based on content. Oh, you're doing a horror film. I don't like horror. I mean, how do you do that? So no, we kind of pride ourselves on not doing that. I know there's a few states that have a little clause. Well, the only thing that doesn't qualify is pornography. That would be disqualified. But there are some states that have a little clause in there about, I think, Texas and Tennessee. If you portray the state in a disparaging way, it won't get the credit. We don't do that. We're above that in California. We believe in free speech.
We're used to it.
Paul, when you're giving out permits, how about on your end? Do you need to meet or have any kind of criteria when you're meeting with producers who are looking at locations? Do you actually ask for scripts or?
We don't ask for scripts. What we ask for is the activity that they're going to be doing, and then it determines what level of review has to happen at the various city jurisdictions. It may trigger the need to have a monitor present if it's high level of activities. If there's going to be great disturbance like gunfights and those kinds of things, we do a broader notification. So it's not the content of what it is, it's the activity that they're doing determines the level of permitting that we look at. It's one of the things, though, that because our city agencies, while they are stressed, as you mentioned, they're so used to seeing some of these things that we're able to process a lot of this ability to do fireworks or fire displays where a lot of cities freak out completely. You talk about blowing up a car and they just go to pieces and don't know what to do. And we get calls frequently, even around the state of California, saying, how do you handle it when? And the nice thing is they just breeze through most of our agencies because they are used to seeing it so much. I wish they were more used to it because I think that the revenue generated by these companies could help to put some of those employees back to work in the city in addition to people in the industry. One of the interesting facts, and one of my favorites is, you know how many Starbucks there are in California? Okay, for every one of those, there are 3 small businesses totally dependent on the film industry. And when you recognize the scope of the dependency of this state on the film industry, there is absolutely no reason you can understand why they aren't fighting tooth and nail to keep that work here and not letting shows like even the Hatfield and McCoys, which is based in Appalachia, filmed in Romania. I mean, it's not just in the state competition, this is all over the world. And we have about 600,000 people in this region alone, let alone the rest of the state, whose jobs are dependent on it. And we're at 60% below normal. Can you imagine if we went back to where we were, how many people would be employed solving many of the problems of the state of California in an incentive program that the Assemblyman helped to design that actually makes money for the state? So there's a message that needs to be clearly given to Sacramento about the potential to change overnight some of our economic conditions in this state if they will just get more competitive.
So Felipe, you're moving now to a city position, and so I wonder if you could just talk about a little bit about what your goals are as councilman-elect and what your vision is for the city.
You know, with all of this conversation, it makes me want to now run for the state senate so I can go back and go and fight for the Amy and Paul. That's how they fired me up the first time to get this thing. I think Paul's absolutely right. I mean, if we have a healthy program in place, and we've got a good program, but it's not the best, and I think Paul hit it right on the head. The competition used to be that we had Canada and then we had 40 states who were going after this industry. And now we know that the United Kingdom has got 1,000 films under their belt over 5 years and the equivalent of $1.2 billion in tax credits. That's making it so that folks actually go across the pond, as it were, to go film. And that's wild to me, which is why I think that your advocacy, your stewardship, your ability to contact your legislature through your legislators is critically important to make sure that we fight for this industry. I get very excited when I hear problems about filming and permitting because my new role, effective July 1st, is to be one of the 15 council members for the city of Los Angeles. And you can rest assured that we'll all be talking some more and meeting to try to understand what it is that Los Angeles as a government can help this industry do to succeed and to make the case. Now, the good news for us here in the City Council of Los Angeles is that we've got a lot of folks who had previously served in the state legislature. Paul Krikorian, who was the original author of this legislation in 2009, he got it done through the budget process, is somebody who's been a real champion on this issue. Paul Koretz also served in the legislature, understands the value of this program, and Council Member Herb Wesson, Council President Herb Wesson, and on and on and on. So I'm excited that the largest city in the state will have the ability to leverage its political will and might to make sure that we continue the fight in Sacramento.
So, that's great. Thank you. So this is for anyone on the panel who wants to answer. When you're starting a project, do you kind of set out to do different budgets, or who's the decision maker where a project ends up? Is it the producer? Is it the distributor? Is it, who, when you're working with the writer?
So I'm on a project called Transcendence right now, and I've been on it for a little over a year. And we started out, I think the film was set in Boston and Los Angeles. And so we scouted Boston. We looked at the pictures, compared the incentives. Then we scouted New Mexico, and then Johnny Depp got involved, and we moved to Los Angeles because he wanted to be in Los Angeles. But then the budget went up, so they had to find a rebate state. We looked at Canada, and ended up in New Mexico. So they're constantly looking at everything they can, any new incentive to save as much money as possible, and they're very focused on the bottom line. So.
And Ilyanne, we were told when I went around and toured a lot of the studios and others that when they write budgets for the features, they compare incentive states and countries, and they only were using LA to show how much they'd save. And it's because we weren't competing. So it's a bottom line issue most of the time. And unfortunately, what used to be really, I think, creative first, now really is more about that bottom line.
I don't know if many people know this, but on a couple of films I've worked on, people actually go to the state, go back to the state and say, I'll make you a deal. You give me an extra incentive, this amount, and we'll bring the movie there. I mean, they're actually negotiating now, state by state. So that's been happening in Hawaii and Kentucky.
No, they definitely, I mean, when we do budgets for features, they do. Every state that's got an incentive, they want to see what it's going to be, and they play the states off against each other, and whoever comes through with the best deal, that's who gets it. Television, there's usually not as much lead time, so you don't have time for that. Usually they see where everybody else is running to, and then they just go straight there and say, well, if it's good enough for all of them, it's good enough for us, whichever state gives the most incentive, whether it's Georgia or Louisiana, North Carolina. Texas today just announced that they're increasing the amount of money they have for tax credits. Illinois, as well as I say, New York, to do that. But they look at all of those, and they've got finance departments that pump out these budgets. And so many times when I'm hired, they're basically handing it to me, and they're saying, we did the research, this is the best place, get on a plane.
Stephen, did you want to add in?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I do primarily feature films, so it's always a financial decision because no matter what you're trying to do creatively, if you can't get the movie made because there's not enough money, you're wasting your time. So at the end of the day, we're in a business now where you have to deliver way more than you ever had to visually and creatively, but you have to do it for less money. And the money keeps shrinking and shrinking, and you're always going like, okay, how can I do the same movie I did 3 years ago? How can I do that same formula now for less money, only make it better? So it's definitely a challenge. I personally, as a producer, I mean, I absolutely have a lot of influence as to where the movie's going to be made. And I like to make movies in Los Angeles, and I've been really successful at making most of the movies in my career here, but I've traveled all over as well. And but I know that I have to roll up my sleeves in a particular way when I'm going to try and fight the fight to stay in Los Angeles.
You had told me, though, that there was a real positive with regard to casting your films, though.
Well, we have the best talent pool in the whole United States here, or the world, really. There's a real reality that when you're making a film, Like if I'm looking at making a movie in another state, I'm basically going through and I'm going, really only the one-line roles are the ones that I'm going to count on that I'm going to be able to do there, and I better be prepared that anybody who has any kind of a real role in the project is going to have to be flown in from Los Angeles or New York, because there's a lot of great talent in New York too. But you know, I can't count on, you know, a role that works 3 weeks and is a really serious role being cast out of New Orleans. Maybe I'll get lucky, but I can't count on it, so I have to budget that it's probably going to come from Los Angeles. And the reality, unfortunately, is that a lot of places where you go to shoot, and especially if the more rural you are, even if you are able to fill a lot of these one-line roles in those places, you might end up in the editing room. This happens all the time, where the performance just is not there, and you end up either having to cut around it, or you end up having to revoice it later, and that's kind of a bummer, unfortunately.
You know, Ilyanne, one of the things that's true about LA, and we talked a little bit about it before, but even without having the incentives sometimes, the technical things that need to be done drive people here. So we had a director call, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. He did a little film called Inception. And he said, I'm not sure I can do this anywhere. I need to have it rain hundreds of thousands of gallons down on a city street and drive a locomotive through the center of the city. And we said, we can do that. And we did. So that scene in Inception is not CGI. There's a locomotive running through downtown LA and rain towers for 6 blocks for 2 weekends in a row. And most cities wouldn't do it. So the same director came back and said, I'm having another problem. I need to put ice over a river. Can I do that? And we're like, we can do that. So in The Dark Knight Rises, that whole scene of the guys walking on the river is the LA River with stuff on it, and he was actually walking on it, and we make it happen. So there are some times that LA's ability to move, to make happen, and to do things that a lot of cities are afraid of can overwhelm when you have someone who's a powerhouse, either the celebrity or the director or the producer, who really wants to make the movie they want to make it. And so the good news for all of you who are in the audience from this region is we still have that reputation and that ability. We just need to be a little more competitive to get more of it here.
You can also get everything 24 hours a day here in Los Angeles. I mean, that makes a difference. So many problems, you know, you find a problem that's occurring at 11 o'clock at night, and it's a big thing that something didn't come out the right way, or somebody changed their mind and they want something different and they really want it badly, and it's like, you can have it there in the morning. You can find out how to do it. You know, there's enough people here. And a lot of those things you're talking about, there's technicians here who can actually do those things. I don't know that those technicians in another state would probably have to be flown in to do those kinds of things.
That's right. And just to top Paul, as the state film office on that same film, Inception, they needed to close a freeway overpass so that they could throw a van off of it in slow motion and have it drop into water, and we did that for them. And we actually do, and there's not that many places actually in the country that can do that, know how to do that, close a freeway for a shoot. And we do it, you know, many times a year.
So talk a little bit more about that, Amy. So you just don't handle the incentives.
Oh, right.
Talk about the other
but we're
work.
here talking about the incentive, right? But we do what other film offices do, which is coordinate and facilitate and try and assist productions all year long. And we do handle the state properties, so freeways fall under my purview. Parks, beaches, prisons, all of that. So we are the go-to department to, as I say, turn a no into a yes, to help him get access to a location that he wants to get into.
Do you call, Chris, so she pointed to you, so
Oh,
you
yeah,
call
yeah.
upon
No, I mean,
the location manager.
No, Amy was very helpful with Argo and FilmLA as well. They've got a very good, intelligent, hardworking staff at FilmLA, and they do everything they can, and they get hit with a lot of problems. They're sort of in the middle. I mean, we're hammering them to get the freeway closure or to get into a neighborhood, and then they're getting calls from people that are truly affected by it, residents or businesses, and they're hammering them from the other side. So I don't think he actually, do you sleep well? No, you're just getting hit from both sides every day.
Well, we talk about balancing,
It's
and
difficult.
it's a balancing act, especially, Stephen, as you mentioned, it happens so much, and people do get used to it to the point that it's not special. But I do think the FilmWorks campaign, which I thank SAG-AFTRA for helping us put forward, has really changed a lot of attitude about talking to Angelenos about why this is critically important. And we'll continue that campaign as well. It does help us, too, in those complaint generations.
But I think if people understand, why it's important and how it helps them, the economy, that hopefully they'll have a little bit higher tolerance than what they normally have had in the past.
So I just want to also backtrack just when you said that you're having trouble finding across the town. I just want across the country. I just want to clarify. SAG-AFTRA does have members across the country, and there are many fine actors who are our members. I'm sorry you haven't been able to find them.
It's not. It's more. They don't get the chance. Quite honestly, they don't get. They don't get the opportunity to play larger roles because most of the major talent is coming from Los Angeles or New York, there are definitely other talent centers, but we do have an advantage here in Los Angeles. There's just there's so many, and most of the movie stars live here. Or certainly a great amount of them, and that drives a lot of the business too. And as others were saying, sometimes a movie gets made in a particular place because that person lives there, and they're only going to do the movie if it happens in that place because they want to be home to their family at night. And fortunately, a lot of that are Angelenos.
Yeah, no, I know that. That was one of the reasons that CSI New York was done in Los Angeles. Certainly Gary Sinise wanted to be here with his family. And I know, for instance, on The Good Wife, that's shot in New York, but it's set in Chicago, Juliana Margulies wanted, obviously, to live at home. So sometimes the cast can dictate where it's going to shoot and overcome the budget in some cases. But more often than not, when that happens, they're trying to squeeze other areas of the budget to get it down.
I was just going to say, all that happens is that everything else gets cut. They don't change the overall budget. It just means you get less money for everything else.
So, Stephen, when you're on a set, do you find that also people want to work in Los Angeles, or do you find that majority of the performers who get flown out tend to come from Los Angeles and New York?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think, with very few exceptions, maybe if it's Paris, you might be glad to go on location. But no, it's hard. This was like the gift of all time. And there were discussions at one point about moving Seventh Heaven. I had a 7-minute commute for 11 years from my home to the set of Seventh Heaven. But even we in Los Angeles, with an incredibly simple show to shoot, had to make certain accommodations. There was a neighbor who lived on a street in Santa Monica that we used for the exterior of the front of the Camden house. And we would go there a day every episode or every other episode. A next-door neighbor, I don't know what it was. No one could recall ever having an altercation with this person, but as soon as we started to shoot on any day, car horns started honking, alarms went off, the lawnmower started running, and nothing could get through. To the point where we stopped shooting in front of that house. And the people who actually owned the house eventually had to sell it a couple of years later because they were making so much revenue from Seventh Heaven renting their house to shoot. Anyway, this street life of shooting in LA or New York is very real, and there's nothing like shooting at home. It's a huge, huge thing not to have to. I have a good friend who is a stunt coordinator, and he shot a show in North Carolina that's now moving to Texas. He's got 2 kids, and his wife took a year off, and they all moved to North Carolina last year. And she took a year off from her master's program, and now these things are really, really difficult to live with. Now, that's not a reason why we should have tax incentives. I think the big reasons are everything you've heard, but certainly from an actor's point of view, you'd always rather be at home. And we did take that for granted for many years, those of us who lived in either New York or LA. And it is sort of astonishing the show that I was just doing in Atlanta takes place in Beverly Hills. It's crazy.
That's the Devious Maids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad that went there. So what are some of the best, worst locations for when you're choosing? What were the most popular locations in Los Angeles to film? Obviously downtown's a big hit.
Spring Street.
Right.
City Hall.
City
City Hall,
Hall.
Spring
Hall,
Street,
Griffith
you
Park.
know, which has some issues going on now with bike lanes and parklets and things that are all good-natured projects, but they also tend to make it more challenging for filming to happen down there.
Yeah, we're all laughing because we all sit on the film, most of us sit on the citywide task force for filming, and so we deal with a lot of these challenges. So we're just kind of laughing because it does seem to be that challenge. Paul, your FilmWorks campaign really took off to kind of educate people. What else can people do to kind of, what would you want people to do to take away from this evening?
Well, I think the biggest thing really is to become advocates for yourselves and for this industry in California and in the cities where you live. Not every city in the state is easy. There's a model film ordinance that the California Film Commission helped to develop with LAEDC and with FilmLA that, if uniform around, makes it easier. But I think really critically, you need to advocate for yourselves and not expect others to do it. The more people hear from you, the better, and the more likely we'll see change. And I think the other part of it is you have been heard. There's some good news coming from this. Stephen, you talked about these sort of situations where people interfere. Well, LA responded by passing an ordinance that now if you interfere with a permitted film, they can arrest you. And boy, is that cut down on the gardeners showing up out of nowhere.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that.
So it is because they do hear when you advocate for yourselves on issues like that. And LAPD now has 3 traveling units out to help make sure filming gets to happen,
And they're
also
great.
to stop bad filming.
The LAPD on location in LA is fantastic.
So there's hope. Your voices are being heard, and where it needs to be heard most now is Sacramento. And to that end, the film liaisons around the state, film offices and commissions, are working on getting data from little counties where a hardware store's entire profit for the year is because commercials are filming in that county. And getting that message to the northern legislators is going to be really important. So if you know people up there, have them call somebody. It's I think the only thing that really will change the dynamic in California is if it truly competes on the international stage for this work.
As a location manager, when are you brought in? Are you brought in the script, and how do you approach going into a neighborhood or even into businesses?
Well, pretty early on. It's usually the production designer and the director and the producer and myself. We're a pretty small group, and we try to evaluate all of our options and look for the best match and the closest option and probably the least expensive. And we try to evaluate those. And then it just becomes, collecting information and evaluating the information that takes months. We look at, on the holiday, we looked for that hero house for 6 months. And we looked at everything. I mean, I was literally walking streets in Beverly Hills and Pacific Palisades and San Marino and just looking at every single possibility 3 times. So it takes a long time.
What were some of the creative choices that you had to make? I'm trying to remember from Argo. I know
Argo? Well, I mean, it's very difficult, right, when you're trying to do creative matches. And, the embassy that was in North Hills, the North Hills VA. We shot interior and exterior on that. We just did, the effects guys did a good job, like putting mountains in the background and things like that. We greened it up.
Advances in visual effects have made it way easier to try and accomplish some of these things on a bigger scale than you could do, years ago.
Like in what way?
Well, because like you're saying, you can add mountains, or I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a shot of in baggage claim of a boat on the water that's supposed to be in Chicago. We digitally removed Catalina Island from the background.
We shot at Zsa Zsa Gabor's house. That was the producer's house, and that we wanted the feel of old Hollywood, right? So that was.
Sure, you found it there.
We did. Yeah, they were fantastic.
Was she there?
Yes, she was. Yeah, she was there the whole time. I mean, she's ill, but she was there, and she was glad we were there. And that was door knocking, old Hollywood celebrities, and it was really an interesting experience. Got to meet a lot of really cool forefathers in our industry. So.
I know certainly on our show, I mean, on features, obviously you have months to do all of that. Many times we would get our script for the episode and only have 7 days to figure out where we were going to shoot it and find those locations. And frequently we would use green screen quite a bit to be able to add in skyline of Manhattan, Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, things like that to help make everybody believe we were in New York, but shooting it in Los Angeles.
I will say,
Felipe, I bet we could get City Hall to do something that look like the Empire State Building if we tried, right?
If it means jobs, absolutely.
Oh, actually, LA is good. If you have to move fast, everybody speaks the same language. Not only the crew members and the producers and the businesses, but also the residents do as well. You can really operate pretty efficiently. It's such a big part of our culture here that everyone's on the same page. Yeah, and when you work outside of this area, you really notice it. When you have to start from scratch.
Like what's base camp, right?
Base camp. Yeah, I spent 2 hours. So I'm working on a movie in Albuquerque. The next door neighbor wanted me to come over and videotape me explaining to them what it was that we were doing. It was a 2-hour process, and it was very odd and awkward, and they still didn't understand how it all worked. They were very nervous, very suspicious, and I've never had to do that in LA.
But that kind of, you referred to door knocking, and that kind of, it is sort of a diplomacy. And if a location manager does it, I directed a few episodes of TV shows, and going around with a location manager and actually explaining to you that we're going to be shooting next door, and here's exactly what it will be like in your house for that day. It will be this, it won't be that. That kind of time taken is, when it's done, it is such a boon to the industry here, and when it's ignored, it really, I think, exponentially harms the industry.
Thanks for saying that. Be nice to location managers if you can, if we're shooting across the street from you. I mean, companies should be responsible, but be nice to us. Thank you.
So we talked a lot about residential. What about businesses? I mean, how you're finding businesses?
Businesses are starting to get it. It used to be 10 years ago, there was a guy down at Spring and 6th, we called him the taco cart guy, and he would move his cart into the neighborhood and he would just start demanding, his money, his whatever it was, $1,000. But that's kind of over now. I've actually found that businesses have been really pretty supportive.
I actually think, I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but since the problems with the economy, there are a lot of people who've actually found, oh, this is a way that I can supplement my income when I'm not doing so well in my, whatever my business is or something like that. So I've actually found it a little bit easier in the last few years to accomplish certain things within certain financial parameters than I did before, because across the board film companies are cutting what they can spend, and so people, businesses and people in homes actually need the revenues a little bit more than they did maybe 10, 15 years ago.
So we'll start taking a few questions here. So this one looks like it's for Felipe. When you take your new government post, what specific steps will you take to ensure that LA does not lose another $1.2 billion to places like the UK?
So, I'm excited about my new term in the LA City Council, more so because as much as I love working with Amy, I'll be working with Paul very closely to understand what is it that we can be doing. We were just talking as we were getting ready here, there's been a lot of movement, for example, on wanting to make streets safer for bicycles, but that's posed a real problem for people who are looking for locations to not look like Los Angeles, especially if they're doing something. So even though that may not sort of jump off as a significant sort of potential change in how we do our infrastructure, it has a tremendous impact for you all. But I enjoy these types of forums because I'm not the expert, you all are. And so to be able to sit with folks who actually are making the magic happen gives me the ability to understand what it is that the city, and at the time the state, can do to make things easier for you all so we can continue to make a prosperous economy. So I'm very excited to hear what those suggestions are going to be.
Great, great. This is a question from Kevin Hoffner for Paul, which is a great question. If I'm shooting on a very low budget, no budget short film or webisode, is there any kind of flexibility agenda for permits, and is there any considerations given changing media and giving low budgets?
We don't have a scaled fee system, but webisodes are becoming a big part of what's filmed in LA. So we're seeing more and more of it. So what can we do to help you? There are several things. One, we have a production planning department that will talk to you about what you're trying to accomplish and try to get you into the most inexpensive locations and in the least amount of permit review and potential fees that we can deliver for you. And that's partly why we developed a site called Loco Scout, which has all of these facilities on it to preview and to download, and it was filmed, actually the photos were taken by location scouts for us so that they're exactly what you want to look at. And right on that site it tells you if they're free or if there's a small fee. But we're working very hard because we also recognize that the vast majority of work that we're helping to process right now is micro-budget or direct-to-web or webisode. And so we're working really hard to help plan that production in a way that avoids a lot of the review fees and other things that have to happen.
With the advent of technology, have you seen a shift in the way how you shoot a film or the way how you do your business?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh,
What do we-
well, visual effects, like I said, has really made a difference. I mean, also most everything I'm shooting digitally now. So in some cases, cameras are smaller, footprints are smaller, but not necessarily. I mean, some of those cameras are as big as any other Panavision camera too. That just depends. But definitely because of advances in visual effects, there's a lot of things we don't bother with anymore. Like I don't bother trying to recreate certain types of signage that are really expensive. I can paint it out cheaper, put something else up later, and limit it to just the shots that are actually going to show, and that kind of thing. So, or also if you're doing a period film with visual effects, there's a lot of things you can accomplish that it's harder to shoot a period film in Los Angeles. The city continues to be modernized. There's not a lot of 1920s structures that look pristine left. So, technology certainly helped with those kinds of things.
Did you want to ask her?
I mean, with the new cameras, a lot of times they do need less light, so a lot of times we don't have to put as many condors and big lights out there, certainly for night shooting and things like that. So our footprint has shrunk in that respect.
A lot of the lighting's not as hot either. I mean, there's
Right.
a lot of lighting now that just
That's more
doesn't
soft
radiate.
lighting, balloon lights, things like that. So that's less, I mean, it's less jobs, unfortunately, but it also is less of a footprint and less of an intrusion into people's lives when we're shooting that stuff.
So Mark Harrington also wants to know about crowdfunding, and if so, is there tax implications? I'm not sure if anyone here on the panel can answer this, but it's kind of an interesting question. Does that affect whether or not where the money comes from in terms of an incentive, or how you're filming?
I just spoke to a producer who was doing that, and they, I think, had half of the financing through traditional sources, investors and other financing backing, and the other 50% was coming from a crowdfunding. What we look at later, we do a very, very extensive, they're required to go through a very extensive audit through a CPA firm, and then we review that paperwork to make sure that they really did hire who they said they were going to hire and they spent what they said they were going to spend. But how they raise their financing is really irrelevant as far as we're concerned with the way we do it. If they actually raised the funding and they actually spent the money here and they paid their workers and they paid their cast and they paid their vendors, everything's fine.
Did you want to add anything?
Just we're hearing a lot more from people who are doing crowd fundraising, and in fact, it was a big subject matter at Cannes this year, the number of independent films there that started out at least with crowdfunding. It's a growing place to go, and there's a whole audience out there for it, the people who are interested in owning a piece of film. I mean, this is why it's so popular all around the world to take this, because people get excited by filmmaking. And so this seems to be a great new tool, and we don't care where the money comes from either.
Amy, we're talking a lot about Los Angeles. Are you seeing also projects being shot in Northern California?
That's one of the issues that the council member-elect, is that how we refer to you now? Council member-elect? Felipe was talking about where there is this north-south issue, and one of the challenges we face is that, yes, 95% of the production that's going on in the state of California is in Los Angeles. The state representatives that cover Los Angeles get it, they're supportive. It's legislators that are up north or in other regions that really don't get that much filming, that might not be on board, might not understand that it really is such a huge issue. We don't have, really, the projects that go outside of LA are commercials and reality shows. Not very rarely a feature in the Bay Area. You'll find micro budget, low budget features. We've had a few features that were in the incentive program that did shoot up there, and that was a big deal because they don't get those features anymore. And for a TV series to go out of the zone is extremely rare.
You also have a situation in San Francisco where they do have a citywide incentive that they are offering to have filming up there, rebate. So they are trying from a city standpoint to try to entice filming to be up in their area.
And the production that we liked, that was sort of the poster child for our program with 2 years ago, Hemingway and Gellhorn, which was an HBO film that shot all in the Bay Area for locations around the world. So it was sort of a way for us to say, yes, we can double for anywhere. They had China, Finland, Spain, Germany. They found all those locations within a 30-mile radius of San Francisco. They got our tax credit, so they were able to keep it in California, and they also qualified for the San Francisco rebate, which takes the edge off of San Francisco being a rather expensive place to shoot.
So if somebody's making a film, they can actually contact your office and you could actually help them find these different locations.
I forgot to mention that we do that too. We are a full-service film commission and we offer location assistance too.
Okay, so Betsy Hammer wants to know for council member Fuentes or Felipe, let's do that. What can individuals do on a daily or weekly basis to nudge legislators and increase the incentives, or here in the city, how much is too much? How little is too little? What would you say?
I think that's a really good question. So a lot of folks don't understand sort of how legislation works in Sacramento. We have a 2-year session, and bills are generally introduced at the beginning of that session, and then you try to survive the committee process. And to Amy's point, I think here, it's really important to know that Los Angeles, its delegation is spot on this issue. They absolutely get it. The challenge becomes making sure that we're reaching out to our friends in Northern California and those legislators, largely because well, let's put it in perspective. When the first program began, it was in 2009, right at the height of this terrible recession. And so with all of the cuts in services that California was facing, it was a difficult conversation to ask for $100 million for this industry. But when you inform people about how this is a real return on the investment, it generates revenue, it generates wages, people pay taxes on that. To me, it seemed like a real good stopgap measure to prevent any further slide in the California economy. Once we were able to sort of communicate that, we were in a position where we were able to be successful. But too much is not going to be enough in this case here. I think it's really important to write to your legislators to say, this is really important to me. This is how I make my living. This is how I feed my family. I think all the time about how is it that we can communicate this to our businesses, our neighbors, so they can appreciate it. I don't know if we start wearing buttons and say, hi, I'm with the entertainment industry, and that's why I'm eating here or I'm at this dry cleaner. But we have to convey the message all the time to our elected officials. Primarily in Sacramento, those legislators are state senators and assembly members, but to the leadership of those houses, and make it really a test for those folks that we want to put in office who understand not just how important this is for California, but to working families of California.
What's the easiest way to write? Do you go on their website? Do you just send in a letter?
You know, everything is good. So what happens is folks communicate with different elected officials by calling and say, hey, I'm for this measure, and I want your boss, your elected official, to vote yes on it. I think that's good, but taking the time to send the email and writing the letter or faxing the letter is really, really important. Better yet, make sure that you're plugged into the California Film Commission and LA FilmWorks, so that when it's time for us to tell the story in Sacramento, to talk to the legislative leadership, and to be in committee, that we have that testimony so people understand and see the faces behind this industry.
So when you were in the California Assembly, that was probably you looked at the letters and the written word much more effectively?
I did, but I was sold. So what I would do is I would take the information that I had and I would take it to my colleagues, the leadership in both houses, and say, hey, this really is important. And then when that was not working as well as I needed to, we went ahead and dug up all of the wage information as an industry to demonstrate how this isn't a giveaway. This is a revenue generator in the time of the worst economic crisis of our lifetime. And when that didn't work as well as I wanted it to, I was lucky enough to have a very good conversation with Governor Brown. Well, at the time it was Schwarzenegger the first go around, and then Governor Brown the second go around, and that helped. But it only was strong because I had those letters, I had those voices, I had great advocates in Paul and Amy and the Teamsters and IATSE, and everybody was there with us making the case. And I can't tell you how important that is. But with your letters, your conversations with your legislators, that resonates with them. They know when they fly up to out of Burbank or Ontario to Sacramento that this is really important. This is just as important as public safety. This is just as important as any other issue, because it's real dollars that come out of our pockets if this business, this industry leaves California.
That's great. This question is from James for Richard, Stephen, or Chris. In terms of making a low-budget film, what tips can you give to the nascent producer who has to stay in Los Angeles? What locations, what tips can you give for somebody that are more accessible? And we'll talk about the actors too being...
Well, certainly depending on the level, obviously there are free locations that can be seen on the websites, and if you can utilize those. Obviously locations usually do cost money, so less locations is probably going to cost you less to do the film. Obviously, there's arrangements with all the unions, I mean, SAG, DGA, IA, Teamsters, for doing low-budget films. Most of it comes down to doing it for less days, because time is money, and just being smart about how you utilize, the amount of crew you need, how many actors, where the locations are. I know when we did Saw, we did that for $1 million, and it was done in LA for 18 days. So there are ways to do it depending on the requirements of the script. You're not going to do Transformers 4 for $1 million unless you get the real models, and play with those. So you have to figure that out.
LA is such a big city and talent pool. There's a lot of people here to help. So, there's always, if you're making a super low budget film, like you had said, there's low budget agreements with all the unions, but there's a lot of people who will help, and if they have a hole in their schedule, you can find more people here to help than anywhere else, or friends who have crew members who are, they're not doing something right now. They all like to work on movies, and if they're not doing something, most crew people I know will work on a tiny little movie, and then they'll work on a big $100 million movie a few weeks later.
As far as locations, I worked in independent film for a long time before I got into the studio stuff. But one effective way, if you're starting on a very small project, is you can just make a list. Robert Rodriguez shared this with me, but if you make a list of all the locations that you have access to, if you have an uncle that owns a auto repair place, and your parents work, whatever you have access to. Maybe the financier has a big mansion, but you kind of try to write around what you already have access to is one idea. And if you can't do that, then you stay away from interrupting business, stay away from expense. Don't go to Rodeo Drive and do a motorcycle up the sidewalk. But otherwise, city-owned properties, state-owned properties, those are very low cost, almost free, or shooting in a park or at the beach, or where you're not interrupting people's lives, and you can do that pretty inexpensively.
One thing I would say, though, is sometimes with the lower independent films, there is a temptation to do what they call steal the location and do it without going through FilmLA for the permits, and that usually is a mistake, because one, that can ruin the neighborhood. Also, you can get your film shut down if you don't have the proper permits to do it. So as Paul said, there are ways to do it inexpensively and work with them, but to just go out there on the streets and try and steal it is not the best idea.
The two other real risks you take are your insurance can void you out because you're doing an illegal act. You can be arrested, and the LAPD can actually confiscate your equipment, which if it's rented and you're going to wait 8 months for a court date, you're in trouble.
So the process, I know you have the online permitting process, Paul, but I wonder if you could just walk James through it.
Sure. Basically, I would encourage him first to call our production planning group and tell him what he wants to do and let us help avoid the big cost items for them. But it is an online system. Anyone can subscribe to it. And it's just a form you fill out online, and then one of our coordinators works with you to get all the clearances wherever you're going in whatever jurisdiction. And we'll advise about avoiding a certain activity or a tactic you want to use in order to reduce the cost. And it's our job to try to make it work for you. We also advise about neighborhoods that may be expensive because they've either had a lot of filming or there's an agitation level. So I just encourage them. There's so much expertise among the 80 people who work at FilmLA to help you make it work well and without a lot of the traumas. Not using us really is a mistake for you because you will trip into a lot of things, including the potential to have a black and white on your set that you don't want.
So Richard mentioned that SAG-AFTRA has low-budget agreements. We also have new media agreements. We have it with the different. Stephen, as an actor, how do you approach projects, and do you look at where it's filmed, or do you really just look at the script itself, or?
You know, I think more and more, most 99%, probably 99.99% of actors are going to hope that it's in a location that's convenient for them, but they're going to take the work wherever it is because they have to go there. You know, there are a tiny handful, about 20 people, I think, at any time who have a bigger choice than that. So it isn't often that you can say, oh, no, you know, it's shooting in Hoboken, I don't want to go there. You're going to go there because that's the job and it's been offered to you. I wanted to say that, you know, what actors respond to is roles. And even though we're very in love with the visual in film now, I hold fast to something I read in Frank Capra's autobiography, where he said, you can have the most thrilling location with the most gimmicky, astounding effects going on. But if there aren't characters that the audience is interested in saying wonderful things, the audience isn't going to care. And he said, by the same token, if you have characters saying wonderful things who the audience can care about, you can shoot them in front of black drapes, and the audience really won't care. They won't know. So I do think, particularly if you're starting out, keep it simple. You know, Edward Albee, the great playwright, got his career started because he wrote a play called Zoo Story, which took place on a park bench against black drapes. And that play is thrilling to watch. It's been filmed. And, you know, he knew one set, two characters, bench. So it really, I think particularly if you're starting small, it still is about the characters. And if you write good parts, you'll be amazed who will come and work for free. I mean, really. Because that's what actors always respond to.
We're not free. They have to.
Oh, not free. No, but under certain low-budget agreements, we will work for free, and they're legal agreements. But, you know, actors will work for really, really low wages in order to play a good role. And you see it time and time and time again, even with the hugest stars.
Were you able, Stephen, for your film, were you able to get, all the films you've done, were you able to get people that you thought you were not possibly accessible or attainable?
Well, I've been lucky. I've had really amazing casts in all of my movies, and I've made movies for, you know, under $1 million and to, you know, up to 20 million. That's as high as my movies go. But actors are always driven by roles, and, you know, sometimes you may have trouble getting to them, but if you can get to them somehow, some way, you know, I will always go after whatever actor I think is the best actor for a role, no matter what we're spending, you know, on a salary for them, because if it's a really good role, I know that they're going to respond. And, you know, as a producer, I mean, if I'm doing that kind of movie, it's set up really so everyone's in the same boat. You know, we wouldn't go to, you know, a really recognizable actor and ask them to work under the super low budget agreement for the $100 a day or whatever it is they get, and then be paying some other guy, you know, $10,000 a day or something like that. I mean, you set them up so it's fair across the board for not only your actors, but your crew members and everybody. I mean, you put yourself, at least in my movies that I've done that way, I put myself in the same boat. I mean, you know, many of those movies I've made, I didn't even get a fee. You know, so, but I was making them because they were just really great pieces of work, and I wanted to get them out there and get them done.
Amy, do you have any kind of statistics in terms of, or Paul, in terms of like trending that we've seen in terms of filming?
Well, Paul could probably speak better to the, he's got the better statistics about filming on location in Los Angeles. What we've been tracking is feature film production in California, and we had seen where it used to be about, I think it was 66% of all feature films shot worldwide were in California. That dropped down to about 38%. So, but everybody knows that here, right? We've really seen a lot of feature films leaving. Paul can speak to the statistics about filming on location here.
Yeah, so we've seen a trend, and 1996 was the peak year for features, and we watched it just continuously on a very sharp downward angle until the film incentive, the tax incentive came in place. And it turned it, so it was no longer on this downward angle and sort of leveled it and gave it a slight uptick. And so it stopped the bleeding pretty much and helped us to keep that sort of level. Last year, the real shock, I think, to everybody was 23 new television dramas, 21 of them left California. And for the first time in history that we recorded, we were doing less than 50% of television in LA and in California. That's a shocking thing to happen. This year, we'll be doing our pilot study, which is international. It's all pilots filmed in the world and where they're being picked up. We used to do that. It's color-coded. It used to be all red, which was LA. And what you'll see if you follow it in the various trades that'll come out next week, it's multicolored because these shows and these pilots are being done all over the world and picked up all over the world. So the trend line we're seeing here in Los Angeles is a sort of a flat level right now that we need to see turn up to recover. But we're also seeing lower and lower and lower economic value work being done as the other states and countries continue to pull the highest value work out of state. And I think that's what the coalition of unions, the film liaisons around the state, and legislators are looking at in next year's bills. How do we turn that corner and become truly more competitive? What do we have to do to tweak this tax incentive to really get into it and to make it work? And the interesting thing to me in the discussions is New York is so expensive to film in that it's almost equal with the tax incentive, they're telling me. To go to New York and get the tax incentive is about the same cost as if they stayed in LA. But the corporate parent needs the tax credit. So we have to be more competitive, in particular with my old friends from the East Coast, because I am originally an East Coaster too. But they're doing a great job. Mayor Bloomberg and the governor of New York have done a terrific job of making a claim and a stake that they want to take this business and become the center of the universe for entertainment. And I don't want that to happen. I want to see it come back and fully blossom here in LA.
So as producers and a location manager, what would you like to see if you had kind of like a wish list? What, I mean, obviously tax incentives increase, but what other kind of things would you like to see in terms of the city or in terms of the state?
I mean, the tax incentive is super important, and I'd like to see it be bigger, obviously, so that more people could take advantage of it. That is super helpful, and it's been a great tool since it's been in place. You know, there's always, you know, more cooperation. You know, can we figure out how to, you know, streamline the process and how to get more people in the city on board with maybe being more cooperative in terms of costs and things like that. You know, those are sort of age-old challenges. I think FilmLA has, like, you know, done a lot of things, like, you know, just even hearing about what you're talking about as far as the new laws that have been put into place regarding interrupting filming. I mean, that's like phenomenal because it's a huge problem here. Parking is a huge problem here. It's one, you know, it's like, you know, to look at the huge amounts of money that we have to spend on parking, and none of that gets in front of the camera is always a big challenge. You know, so, you know, I know that you've been helpful with the with any city-owned parking lots, and, you know, that's certainly something that we can use help with overall.
No, it's certainly one of the big expenses for us when we would go downtown was the parking. So obviously any help in that in terms of free parking lots that can be utilized by crew, as well as the working trucks. So anything that monetarily levels the playing field so that you've got the competitiveness taken away from going to the other states. But again, as you said, the service, that if there's a way to monetize how good the crews are here, the service and the cooperation that you can get to say, look, this makes it much easier to shoot here than it does on the streets of New York or going someplace else, and be able to monetize that for the studios, then they can see the difference and maybe it can convince them to have more films and TV shows shot here.
I'd say increasing the level of education and appreciation for the value of this industry, particularly in the on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground level of government workers. I see a high level of complacency. A lot of my calls often aren't returned. People just kind of have bigger problems than dealing with the film company. But if they understood the relationship between helping this industry and how that eventually will come back around and make their lives better.
But that usually starts from the top, and it's got to come down. From governors to mayors to city department heads that understand what that value is in education.
Right. It's effective in the rebate states. They've been effective with that. I mean, any level of government worker, and it's really commonly known.
Having shot in most of those states, the advantage is there's less bureaucracy.
Right.
So, we were able to shut down a whole freeway in Baton Rouge for Dukes of Hazzard with one phone call to the head police chief, and he basically said, yeah, we can do that. We'll just put our cars out in front and turn everybody off the other streets.
But, it's doable, but that needs to happen. That's
right, but again, it is
link,
less bureaucracy, or it is that cooperation that everybody has to understand what's involved with it. And unfortunately, they all have their other jobs to do, certainly in terms of transportation and public works and parks and rec and things like that. So many times this is not their full-time job, and so to take them away from what they feel there is their full-time job can sometimes be difficult, and they need that education as well from the top again, that this is important.
Exactly.
So Jackie Penn on our live stream wants to know, Paul, does she need a permit to shoot if she's making a project in her home or in her neighbor's home, and something that's exterior where the neighbors can see, and what about inside?
So if you're in the city of Los Angeles, any filming that's for a commercial purpose requires a permit, wherever it is. And that's basically true in most jurisdictions, that if you're in that, if you're making a commercial project, and I don't want to go into what that means now, call me later if you need further definition, but if it's not for personal use, to promote yourself, to sell, or anything else, it requires a permit. And part of the reason for that is to protect the filmmaker when they go out. In cities that don't do this, that say private property, you don't need a permit, frequently what happens is the neighbor calls the police to complain. The police come out and they shut down the production because there's no permitted way of doing it, and they're doing something strange, commercial, in the neighborhood. So get the permit, pretty much.
And what about, Shirley wants to know, I know it's a little bit out of the LA zone, but what about Orange County, and how does that work with permitting in terms of Orange County?
Well, it may be us soon. Orange County, the county itself doesn't require permits on unincorporated county at this time. However, most of the cities in Orange County are working on their own in their own ways, and many of the county departments and agencies on their own property require permits. We can certainly help them get in touch with Janice Arrington, who's the film commissioner for that county.
Okay, and then these are great questions. Jeffrey Bash on the line also wants to know, if I have a house or a business that I would like to offer to filming, how would I go about getting listed with a location manager or with a producer? How could I go about offering my location?
We get that question, I don't know, 30 times a week, 50 times a week, with people that want to list their homes or businesses to host filming. And we have all kinds of information on our website, or we can email you a document that gives you instructions, how to get listed on websites that location managers maintain. I think you pay a small fee to get that listing, and then but we offer a lot of information, just sort of the how-to, what to expect when your home is used for filming, how to market your home as a filming location, so we can give you all that information on our website, film.ca.gov.
Yeah, I usually refer people to the California Film Commission. They've got a good packet of information. But it's also, you can do all these things and prepare for it. It's almost like running for office. You have to be selected. And you don't know what this is in the script and what they need. You just have to kind of be lucky.
Do you have anything to add there? No, we're good. Okay. So also, now this is kind of the same thing, but along the lines of taking action and being competitive, we kind of touched upon what people can do in terms of running Sacramento, but on a local level, is there something locally that I know we talked about talking to neighbors, is there also talking to council people? How about neighborhood associations, some of the homeowners associations, that kind of thing? Is there any outreach that's going on there?
Well, you named all the good things for people to do. Our community relations department proactively does go to HOAs and other groups to talk about why it's important, how it works, what it does. But I think Felipe is right. One of the things that's been true in the city council is communication to them about the importance has an impact. As long as we keep this in the front of things, it will continue to be something that the council watches and tries to make changes for. One of the things the industry asked for example, was these things like, how can we get free parking spaces? And so they looked and they said, well, you have all these under power line areas and commercial zones that are just sitting there. Let's open them up. And so that communication is critically important. We spend a lot of our time, not only in crisis management with neighborhoods, but in that proactive work through the FilmWorks campaign and others to do that. And you talked before about buttons and wearing. FilmWorksLA.com, get your bumper stickers, get your street vinyls, get your hats, get out there and make it known that it's important.
Great. So I think that the message that we're all sending is it's really important for all of us to carry the message out with us and to educate everybody what we've heard tonight about the importance. So I think that that's the end of our questions from the audience. I just want to thank everybody here for being here. This has been really a great evening on education. And I want to thank FilmLA and the SAG Foundation for partnering with SAG-AFTRA on this evening. And thank you all very much for being here. This was great. Thank you.